Right now, well, let's check in with Jeff Morrow here, kind of cycling in with our WAP First Alert weather team, our experts tracking this. And Jeff, are you seeing any major changes since we last checked in with you?
No major changes, and the National Hurricane Center has started to do their hourly updates in terms of coordinates and wind speeds. We will not get updated forecast tracks until we get to those main advisories, which take place at 10 a.m. p.m. and then 4 a.m. 4 p.m. So we're not expected to get another track anytime soon, but we're getting now updated information in terms of the coordinates, how close it's getting towards the coast, any changes at all in movement, any changes at all in peak wind speed. And right now, everything holding steady. 90-mile-per-hour sustained winds with Hurricane Francine right now, moving northeast at 13 miles per hour. It is currently right now 120 miles southwest of Morgan City, Louisiana, which is pretty close to where the projected landfall is expected to take place. So if we do the math, we're less than 10 hours away from a landfall as it's moving at 13 miles per hour and it's 120 miles away from Morgan City. So here's a look at the forecast track that we are monitoring with Francine. And again, we're expecting that landfall to take place somewhere around St. Mary or Western Terrebonne Parish later on this afternoon or early this evening, more than likely around sunset tonight. So this is going to be a nighttime event where the worst of the weather is going to be moving through our local area, which means it's hard to see what's going on around you, and that can also elevate some anxiety, some fear, things like that. But know that we're not dealing with as strong of a storm as we did with our last one, which was Ida. You can't compare storms, but regardless, we aren't going to be dealing with that kind of level of destruction or how widespread it's going to be. But don't lower your guard as you're looking at this map and saying, well, I'm not in the cone of uncertainty anymore. I'm not going to be dealing with anything. Look at the warning outlay. Tropical storm here in yellow, hurricane in red. Notice how they go outside of the forecast cone. So we're seeing a broad brush of impacts, not just focusing in on the cone track itself. So Category 1 hurricane at landfall, 90-mile-per-hour sustained winds. That's where we're at right now. That's where we're projected to stay at, it looks like. Wind shear, dry air, kind of keeping it status quo. Those are the elements right now that we're keeping an eye on. It does look like we're getting some dry air entrapment into the system, and it does look like we're dealing with some wind shear as well. So here's a look at what we're watching, and you can see that we do have a tornado warning for portions of Plaquemines Parish, so you can see that highlighted here. So that is one of the threats that we're monitoring because of the potential of these tropical cyclones to spin up brief tornadoes. So we do have our first tornado warning tied to Francine already issued for Plaquemines Parish, but we're seeing some of these rain bands also beginning to impact areas in our coastal parishes. But notice how the rain's all the way across our entire viewing area, stretching into southwestern Mississippi as well. And the shades of yellow are starting to outnumber the shades of green south of the interstate corridor. So we're starting to pick up the intensity of the rain. We saw with Ethan's camera shot there down in Terrebonne Parish down here, where he's starting to deal with some deteriorating conditions, and it's going to do it rapidly at times because of these rain bands as they make their way through. So as we zoom in down towards the coast, and you can see we're going to tap into our First Alert radar network with our exclusive radar sites for Franklin as well as Chauvin. So we're getting a high definition look at the rains right now, and you can see where we've got some pockets of very heavy rainfall, even some lightning. So that's where we're going to be dealing with probably our most intense wind, but also our most intense rain. So we're probably starting to see some of these tropical storm force winds beginning to arrive along our coastal parishes. The hurricane force winds will wait until we get closer to landfall, that tied closer to the circulation of Francine. I'm going to switch things over to what we call Doppler velocity. So this gives us an indication of wind speed and wind direction. And you'll notice we're tied into our radar site over in Hammond with the National Weather Service, and we're getting kind of a broad brush expectation of what we're looking at in terms of rotation in the atmosphere. But because we have our First Alert radar network, we can get a little bit more high definition. You can see some little spots right here where we've got some grays and some reds trying to touch some of these green shades of color. And so there is some of the broader rotation we're going to be keeping an eye on with our First Alert radar network sites that we have exclusive access here to WFP. With them being along the coast, we should be able to get a bird's eye view of some of this rotation within some of these rain bands as they approach and move in, and maybe get a heads up as to what could be some isolated tornadoes, especially for our coastal parishes out there for today. The rainfall being one of the aspects we're going to be keeping an eye on in terms of amounts. You can see our entire viewing area under a flash flood watch. That flood watch is in place all the way through the rest of today into the very early morning hours for tomorrow. And what does that entail? It entails the amount of rainfall that is expected to fall from the sky. It does not take into account any kind of storm surge inundation. So you take a look at the map and you see this little swath here of orange shade of color. We're talking about on the order of 5 to 7 inches of rain within this spot. Now, outside of that, notice how it drops off pretty quickly. And again, that's because this is going to be more of a northeastern quadrant circulation in terms of the rainfall. So you can kind of get the aspect here of where the center is going to be and then where the heavy rain is really going to be ingested here. We've got drier on the west side. We've got drier getting infiltrated into the center. So even the southeastern side of this storm may not have as much rain. So it's going to be a finite location where we're going to get this heavier rain band to set up across our area. And it does not look like it's going to be area-wide, but it will be in localized spots where we're going to be dealing with some flash flood concerns. And unfortunately, those flash flood concerns will probably materialize during the nighttime hours. So keep abreast, kind of stay alert, have ways of being alerted. Make sure to check those First Alert weather app indicators for alerts to go on in case a flash flood warning is issued for your location. And we'll continue to monitor how this may impact river levels. But right now, because we're at base flow and because all this rain will be falling, some outside of the catch basin, but majority of which will be in portions of it, we'll see a rise in those area rivers, the Comeet, the Amite, the Tickfall, and the Tangipahoa. But right now, doesn't look like significant flooding is in the forecast. In fact, most spots may just get right below flood stage. It's the lower reaches where we're going to be seeing this persistent easterly wind flow for the time being. It's pushing that water up against the lower reaches of the Amite, the Tickfall, and the Tangipahoa. In those spots, we are seeing water levels rise. We'll continue to see water levels rise until we get the circulation to our north. That will start to see some northerly wind flow back returning to the area, pushing that water back out into the Gulf of Mexico, out of the tidal lakes. That is expected to start to take place as we get into Tuesday afternoon.